All right, hi everyone. Welcome to Believe in Bills, presented by FanDuel. The usual suspects with you today: Adam Benigni, WGRZ TV, and Sports Talk Live Buffalo, Sal Maiorana, Rochester Democrat and Chronicle. Last week, I joked, Sal, that you were like a man of leisure.
Yeah.
Look at you, like no collared shirt or anything. Now that mandatory minicamp is over, you are a man of leisure. Welcome to vacation.
When you work from home, 90% of the time, it's nice to be a man of leisure. I don't have to dress up like you in a suit doing your Sports Live Buffalo thing. Screw that. I could never do what you did for all those years just because I would never dress up every day and have to wear a suit and tie. There's just no way I could never do that. So, yeah, I am a man of leisure. And you're right. The Bills are starting. They broke camp Thursday. This, Adam, is the longest break between the end of the off-season program and the start of training camp that I can remember. I mean, we're going back to, the Marv Levy era, it feels like, when they used to have a long time. You remember back then, there wasn't all this off-season program bullshit that these guys go through. There was like one mandatory rookie camp, one mini camp, and that was it. And then we didn't see them until training camp. But this is really a long break because the season's starting a week later this year. So, yeah, it's also the most terrifying break for NFL executives and coaches, as you know, because now these players are out on their own, not being supervised by the team, and anything can happen. So you kind of cross your fingers that everyone stays out of trouble, doesn't get hurt playing, beach volleyball or something stupid, and they get back to training camp ready to go.
Yeah, like what? Naeem Hines comes to mind, right? With the Jets.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Something
That's
like
a perfect example of what you're talking about. But yeah, it all hinges, correct me if I'm wrong, but it all hinges around the later Labor Day, right?
Yeah.
That's what's kind of driving this whole thing, because everything is built around the distance from that to the start of the regular season. So training camp gets pushed back as a result.
And also because the Bills were granted the extra, they could start a week early because they have a new head coach.
Yeah.
That added an earlier week to this. There are some teams that are still going to have mini camps next week because they didn't get that extra week to work. So yeah, it really is a long break for the Bills, which is great for you and I. I mean, not great for content, but it's nice to not have to be tuned into the football for summer months here, which I love so much.
Unplugged for a good period of time, but we'll keep it going. We're going to have this show, Sabres show as well. Believe in Sabres relative to the draft and free agency. And this is a time to get good guests too, to get some different perspective and everything. And so we're going to work on that just for those of you who've been so loyal to this program and others, just to let you know. Believe in Bills, presented by FanDuel, will continue during this time, and then it'll ramp up again significantly when training camp does arrive at St. John Fisher. So let's kind of hash over some of the main storylines, and this might be a little bit of a longer show because there were some things that we want to address here on both sides of the ball with regard to this mandatory minicamp, which is taking place now, and things that will obviously carry into training camp when things get going. And I want to start with sort of the national perspective on this team, and I think a lot of it, they're right there in the Super Bowl odds among like the top 3 or 4 teams in the league in terms of being favored by Las Vegas. But there's this perception, and I think it came out of the trades, the Patriots for A.J. Brown, and obviously the Rams from Myles Garrett. And it gets back to the narrative that the Bills haven't done enough. And I thought of it this way. I raised this last Monday night on Sports Talk Live, and it led to an interesting discussion, and I think it will here as well. And for those of you watching and listening, I mean, a lot of times I just ask myself this question. The rap on the Bills through the years has been they put just a ton on Josh Allen's shoulders, and they've made him carry too much of the load. How much have they done? Have they done enough? Have they at all alleviated that burden, Sal? And at this point, I don't know that I feel strongly about an answer to that question. I guess because I don't, I feel like they haven't done enough. I feel like that's still the equation that's going to propel this team forward into this 2026 season.
Yeah, I mean, look, they haven't they haven't made the Myles Garrett type of trade or the AJ Brown acquisition like you referenced, of course. I mean, the closest thing they did was the DJ Moore trade. And, I think people were a little bit, wishy-washy on that move. He's going into his, whatever it is, 8th or 9th year. He's been a good player throughout his career, but he's not the kind of guy that really moves the needle like an AJ Brown would for New England and Drake May. So, yeah, but what's also remember too, Adam, that this offense has been one of the best in the NFL, again, because Josh Allen is great, for like the last 5 years. So it's not like they needed a complete overhaul of the offense. It's one of the reasons why Joe Brady's the head coach, because they didn't need to blow this thing up. They're very good on that side of the ball. Now, adding DJ Moore, we'll see if Skylar Bell can do anything. I'm not expecting much from a 4th-round draft pick this year. You've got the returning NFL rushing champion, and you've got an offensive line that's back, except for the left guard, David Edwards. But, we'll see what the competition yields there between Austin Corbett, who, by the way, I talked to him at length the other day at minicamp. Really great dude. Really, really kind of rooting for him, because what an injury journey that guy's been through. And you hope that it's not going to happen here. But Alec Anderson is in that mix. So I think their offense, Adam, it's still lined up to be a very good group. I mean, Josh Palmer was talking the other day about how rough last year was with all his injuries. And he thinks that now that he's healthy, he can finally take that step forward in this Buffalo offense. We'll see what Keon Coleman does. So I think there's a lot to like about what they have on offense. We've talked all offseason. The biggest question with the Bills is the defense. And you asked at the very top, have they done enough to, move this team forward? On the defensive side of the ball, by changing schemes and having Jim Leonard now as the new coordinator, I think that's a step in the right direction. I think we had all grown tired of the McDermott 4-3 and failing in the postseason. Something had to change there, and now something has. They've brought in a couple players that I think could really be good fits. Bradley Chubb, another guy I talked to the other day, being one of them. He's a true stand-up outside linebacker, already taking guys like Greg Rousseau, who's never played that position per se,
right.
TJ Parker under his wing. I think that's a positive development for the Bills. Again, he's not Myles Garrett, but he's a very, very good NFL player. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is a veteran guy you added to the mix. We'll see what they do at cornerback with Ingve as a 2nd-round pick challenging Max Harrison. Michael Hoyt, who we'll talk about later, I think is going to be ready to go when training camp starts. So you take all of those additions into it, and you look at what they gave or what they lost, aging veterans like Matt Milano, Daquan Jones, Trey White. These guys were all at the end of their time in Buffalo. So I think there's positive development. Look at me being Mr. Positive.
Yeah.
As we go into training camp here.
All right, so let's sift through all of that then. And I suppose let's get a couple of offensive issues out of the way, because I really want to spend a lot of time on the defensive side, because that was the point I was going to make too. The answer to that question lies in largely to what degree they can change things up and deliver on defense. There have been rumblings, you've heard them, I've heard them, that McDermott's defense for opposing offensive coordinators, especially late in the season and in the postseason, had kind of become predictable. Right. They knew what he was about, what he was going to try and do. So now it's a completely different set of circumstances moving forward. So we'll talk about that. But in the interest of just addressing briefly some offensive issues, James Cook showed up. You mentioned the rushing champion, and had been away for the voluntary portion. And there was an obvious storyline last year with that relative to his contract. This appears to be just business as usual. They're okay with this. I mean, Brady was like he'd been in contact with them. He's comfortable with it. It obviously worked for him last year under a more strained set of circumstances. It seems like that's something that Cook would prefer, and obviously that's his choice given the voluntary nature, and that the Bills have grown more comfortable with that. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, look, last year, as you mentioned, he was in a contract dispute, and you understood what he was doing there. This season, look, Adam, if there's one position where guys don't need to be there in the spring, it's running back. There's just flat out, no doubt about it, running backs don't need to be there. Every other position, receivers and quarterbacks need to get, on the same page. Offensive line, defensive line. It's all coordination stuff that you want to get together. And they weren't changing the offense. I mean, if James Cook was a defensive player and he didn't show up, that's a different matter. So it was fine that he was there. He talked the other day about, I guess he's got a couple kids when nobody knew. I mean, we don't know anything about these guys' personal lives, but apparently he's got a couple kids in Florida. So he wanted to be closer to them. No problem. He came up when it was mandatory. He'll be ready to go. Not even an issue with James Cook.
Let's get to left guard. And this is the last piece of offensive business that I had before we go to the defense. But that stands to be one of the key competitions in training camp. What they're going to do there with the departure of David Edwards, Austin Corbett, who you mentioned, and Alec Anderson are the two main contenders at this point.
Yeah, and again, we can't even make a determination on that, Adam, because these practices aren't padded. So, it's really hard to make judgments, especially on offensive linemen in these mini camp and OTA portions. So we'll see when they get to training camp, they put the pads on, things will start getting a little more serious. There'll be some more thudding going on. And we'll see what happens in that competition. Austin Corbett is a grizzled vet, won a Super Bowl with the Rams back in 21. He bounced over to the Panthers. And then I was talking to him. I couldn't believe it. I know he missed games, obviously, but I didn't realize the nature of the injuries he suffered. It is just kind of crazy. And really the funny thing was, Adam, two of them came because he was just flat out hustling. One of them, he ran downfield like 40 yards because I think a receiver broke a tackle and took off. And he's like, I got to get down there and make a block. And that's when he blew his knee out. If he just stayed put, he wouldn't have gotten hurt. So it was, I'm going to write a story about it in a week or so. But yeah, really good dude. And I hope that he can stay healthy because we don't know much about Alec Anderson. Alec Anderson's a young guy. He's gotten into a few games with the Bills, but I don't know that again, I'm making a judgment that I probably shouldn't make. I'm not quite sure he's ready to be the starting left guard on a potential Super Bowl team. But Austin Corbett, if he stays healthy and performs, I would trust him, I think, at this point, a little more than Alec Anderson.
All right, defensively, and let's keep it in the trenches. And I'm interested because I know Jim Leonard has kind of a nuanced take on this, and I'd like you to expand on it because I know you're in on that session with him. Nose tackle. Mm-hmm. What's happening there, and what's really does this defense require a true nose? How is it executed and implemented, and who might best fit that role?
Yeah. I mean, we went back and, Leonard has said this, like when he was at Denver, of course, he wasn't the coordinator, but he was involved in the defense. DJ Jones was their quote unquote nose tackle, but Leonard it was pretty interesting. He said the other day that DJ Jones told them he does not want to play the zero position, which is head up over the center. He felt more comfortable being offset between the guard and center, whichever side the formation called for. And I think we're going to see a lot of that here in Buffalo. Now, Leonard did say that when he was the defensive coordinator at Wisconsin, he did use a guy right over the center in the true nose tackle position. So I think we're going to see what these guys are most comfortable with. And the guys we're talking about are the same guys that they've mentioned to us. Deion Walker, Dwayne Carter is in that mix. And then on the other end, you've got lower guys like, Zion Logue and Fedarian Mathis, who, I'm not sure they're going to make the team, maybe practice squad guys. But those are the names you're kind of talking about in that nose tackle position because there's really nobody else who could fill that role. I mean, TJ Sanders and Ed Oliver are undersized. They're not going to be in that role. So I still don't know that either Walker or Carter are true nose tackle material. If I had to guess, I would think that Walker will be the guy because I'm not even sure Dwayne Carter will make the team. I mean, really, he's a third round pick of a previous defensive coach and defensive head coach. Mm-hmm. I don't know. We'll see. He's coming off a serious injury. I think he's got to have a battle on his hands to make the team. So I guess it's going to be Walker would be the first guy, but you and I have talked about that. I just don't see his body type being a true nose tackle, but they know more than we do. So we'll see.
Where does Walker stand in terms of his weight
He said he was 328 last week, he said, and he played at 338 last year. So I think he made the conscious, like Dwayne Carter made the effort to get heavier. Dwayne Walker wanted to get a little bit lighter. So I think, but even at 328, Adam, that's a lot of man. That's a 6'7" man. Still a lot of bulk there. So he'll be fine. I don't think it's going to impact his play. It might even make him a little quicker.
You know, one of the players I'm fascinated by this question as they switch the scheme to the 3-4. And you raised Greg Rousseau earlier. This came up on Sports Talk Live as well. And this, to me, is going to be one of the more fascinating aspects of training camp and the preseason and into the regular season, because he's going to have to stand up now. Yeah. And he hasn't done this before. And given his length, body type, all of those things, I'm interested in your take. I mean, I don't know the answer. I think it's going to be a challenge for him to transition. How do you envision that process going?
Yeah, look, that's why having Chubb in here has been very good. And Rousseau spoke about Chubb, saying that he's been a big help. I talked to Chubb the other day, and he said, yeah, he's taken those guys under his wing because it is a new position for them. I think what you're going to see with Rousseau is, those outside linebackers will have occasional coverage responsibility. But I think what we'll end up seeing is Rousseau switching sides back and forth, depending on what the formation on the offense is. And I think he's still going to be an edge setter and a pass rusher. I don't think you'll see him drop into coverage too often. I think Bradley Chubb might be some of that coverage piece, but the guy to watch, I think, is Michael Hoyt. Assuming he's back and ready to go, he's a guy who, when he was with the Rams and he played as a stand-up outside linebacker, he has been in coverage. And he's a guy that can do it. I think he's more suited to it. So I think when the Bills are going to drop that stand-up guy into coverage, it'll be more of Hoyt. And I think Rousseau and Chubb are still going to be guys going forward as opposed to backward. Now, they'll be able to disguise things, and you're going to have to see Rousseau and Chubb occasionally drop into coverage. But, yeah, I think Rousseau is still going to be kind of the 4-3 defensive end that he's always been, only standing up doing it.
You raised Hoyt, and that was such a profound loss for this team last year when the Achilles went on him. McDermott had been very open about his enthusiasm for Hoyt and the versatility that he brings, the impact he can bring to that. I see the same thing happening here. If he's back and healthy and ready to go, he adds a dimension that they've lacked in a lot of ways, regardless of scheme.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he said, I talked to him, whatever it was, Tuesday, and he said, look, I've played pretty much every position up front and in the box that there is to play. I mean, he's played defensive tackle in some schemes with the Rams. So the versatility piece that he brings is going to be great for Leonard. Leonard has talked about, he's not going to play like, we knew what McDermott was going to do. It was going to be a 4-2-5. Everyone had their role. Him and Babbage were very big on continuity, right? I mean, that's why Taron Johnson played so much. They liked having their guys together because they felt communication was so important. I think with Leonard, you're going to see more of a revolving door of personnel that's going to be in and out of the game. And guys like Hoyt will allow Leonard to move him around. I mean, I think you'll see him playing the defensive end possession, which is that 5T 4I. I think you'll see him as a stand-up outside linebacker, and you might even see him out in the slot occasionally playing a big tight end. So I think Hoyt is going to be a really key piece to this defense. You could see it last year in the 7 quarters he played that he was going to be a guy who was going to impact the defense. Now you just hope that he hasn't lost anything after his rehab and he can jump right back into it.
What's the deal with a couple of injuries I wanted to ask you about? What's the deal with Cole Bishop and Dorian Williams?
Yeah, that was interesting being over there. Cole Bishop, he hadn't been practicing, so we just, okay, whatever. But it turned out that he had a knee scope at some point in the spring. I can't really pinpoint. We're only over there one day a week, so can't really pinpoint when it was. But he did not participate in the mini camp at all. And he said he'll be good to go for training camp, but that was interesting that popped up. The kid's got an injury history, right? He's been banged up in each of his first 2 seasons with the Bills. And that was one of the things we were concerned about is, can this guy, be a consistent contributor? given the injuries. We saw last year that he bounced back after a training camp deal very well, and he played well. So hopefully that's going to be nothing to worry about. Dorian Williams was the one that popped. I mean, he was seen on crutches, and Brady was very sketchy about what that was. So I have a feeling that it was an off the field injury. He hurt his neck, as you remember, first play of the Denver game. And we all kind of thought that his inactivity early was because he was still, they're still giving that time to heal. But the neck has nothing to do with the crutches, Adam. Right. So I'd love to know what he did. Brady seemed to indicate he'll be fine for training camp, but until you see it, I'm not going to believe it. So we'll see. But he's a key guy. That's a guy they're counting on to be a starter in this new defense. If he is not ready to go at training camp, you start thinking about, hey, do they have to give Matt Milano a call, or do they have to give Shaq Thompson a call to get in there and bring a body in? That'll be interesting to see as it goes out in the late July there.
And Dorian Strong, that was the last item I had for you. This is more of a procedural thing, right? He's got a clear waiver. Speaking of neck injuries, right?
Right.
They want to get him to IR. That's the goal.
And I don't know all the machinations. It's pretty confusing stuff, but they had to. I think whatever the procedure was, they have to get him through waivers, maybe, which nobody's going to make a claim on the kid. And then once that happens, he can go to the IR. I think, Brandon Beane had been talking about this even back at the combine, that it was a serious injury and he had the surgery, and you don't want to mess around with a neck. Right. So I think even back then they were aware that Dorian Strong wasn't going to be available in 2026. The hope is that the kid's career is not over. Like if they give him the year off and he fully heals and he isn't in danger, maybe he can come back in 2027.
All right, that's a good look. Any other items you wanted to add as far as coming out of this mandatory minicamp and looking toward training camp? That's a pretty good overall picture you just presented there.
Yeah, I mean, minicamp is good because you get access to these guys and you can talk to a lot of players. Nothing really more than what we've discussed. I think we've covered all the topics. I think the biggest things we're going to have to watch when they get to training camp, to me, will be the left guard competition on offense, and then just how the defense is fitting together, because there's a lot of guys that are playing different roles, and I want to see how this whole thing comes together once they have pads on and are actually doing something that you can actually make a judgment on, as opposed to watching them run around in what they call the pajamas during the spring here. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to get through it all.
Yeah, and as we began this podcast, I mean, that's really the big question: how well they can answer and how quickly Jim Leonard can get that defense up to speed and contributing at a high level relative to Sean McDermott's tenure and moving on from him as head coach. That's the big question to answer with regard to our original point. Have they done enough to alleviate the load on Josh Allen? So that's your wrap on mandatory minicamp and an early training camp preview. FanDuel, presenting sponsor for Believe in Bills, Believe in Sabres, and other podcasts here on the Believe Network. Stanley Cup odds.
Did you watch the game last night?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
And the Hurricanes, ready to close things out, or try to anyway. Minus 420 as your favorite to do so. Vegas Golden Knights plus 320. John Tortorella vouching for a Game 7. We will see what happens on that front. And in an absolutely wild NBA Finals. Yeah. I mean, to talk about a historic game from the other night and outcome, the New York Knicks now up 3-1, favored to close it out at minus 500. It's really been interesting having two great series and interesting series going on simultaneously.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I just don't care about the NBA at all. I have zero interest. So the other night, I flipped it because it was something else. I think the Yankees had played today. So I looked at it, and they were down, 25 points halftime or something. So I said, I'm not bothered with this. So when I got up the next morning, and all of a sudden I saw the tweets, I was like, holy smokes, what the hell? And then I spent, for a guy who doesn't care about the NBA, Adam, I spent like 20 minutes watching the highlights and all the different, viewpoints. And And that was amazing. That's one of those events that kind of wish, even if you don't care about the NBA like me, I kind of wish I had watched just to say that I watched it. Because it is incredible. Down 20, they were 29 points down early in the third quarter. That was amazing. So I actually games today just for the whatever game five. Whatever that game is tonight, maybe. Is that game Friday? I mean, it was Friday or Saturday, whatever it is. I have to actually watch it. I'm a New York fan, right? I'm a Yankees fan. I generally will root for New York teams, as long as I'm not in Buffalo. So the Knicks.
Yeah, the Knicks. That is Saturday at 8:30. Knicks Spurs.
Okay.
And we had an interesting discussion the other night on Sports Talk Live about a championship drought. Obviously, the Knicks. It's been 73 since the last time they've won the NBA.
53 years.
Yeah, 53-year drought. So
a very Buffalo-like drought.
To have that come to an end, and obviously an ongoing lack of a major sports championship here in Buffalo and Western New York relative to that. And I said for them to win it, I think it would help spur interest across the state. And I would compare it to like when the Cleveland Cavaliers finally won their title. There was kind of a sentiment here, good for them, but, both of these teams, the urgency to finally get something done for what this community deserves and has lacked for so long. That's kind of the spin that I put on it. And I feel like that's the sentiment that people would have here should the Knicks go on to win that series.
I agree. It'd be great for New York. They haven't won a championship since, I think, the Giants. I think the Giants 2011 Super Bowl was the last time they've won a championship in the great state. I'll be in New York a week from today for the Yankees. So hopefully, if the Knicks do win it, I hope all the wreckage and all the danger will have passed in New York City, because I certainly don't want to be there the night the Knicks eventually win this thing, because that will be a dangerous situation. So hopefully over the Bronx, we won't be too affected by what happens with the Knicks whenever that happens.
All right, Sal, we're kind of losing your internet connection there, so probably as good a time as any to kind of wrap this up. We appreciate it. Enjoy the downtime that you do get. Again, we'll continue next week, have another edition of Believe in Bills presented by FanDuel. So for Sal Maiorana of the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle, I'm Adam Benigni, WGRZ TV, Sports Talk Live Buffalo. Thanks for being with us as always here on Believe in Bills presented by FanDuel.